Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, an Ezekiel Elliott edition of the Next Pats podcast. We have a very special guest, Matthew Berry, at Matthew Berry TMR on Twitter. You know him, you love him. He does phenomenal work for NBC Sports and all things fantasy for the Peacock family. And he's dropping all kinds of knowledge on what this Elliott signing means for Rhamondre Stevenson. Is Ezekiel Elliott a fantasy viable running back in 2023 in the Patriots offense in Bill O'Brien's scheme? And he's also got a few little nuggets for all of you who have not yet done your fantasy drafts. I'm going to be honest with you. When I asked the question, it was done totally selfishly because I have not yet done either of my two big fantasy drafts. They're coming up later this month. But if it's information that I could use, I assume you can use it too. Again, completely selfish on my part. So if you don't get anything from that, that's fine. I got plenty. Before we get to Matthew, I just want to break down for you why I feel as though this signing is a valuable one for the Patriots. You're talking about a $1 million signing bonus, a $3 million base salary reported by ESPN's Mike Reese. So essentially $4 million with the opportunity to make $2 million more in incentives to come and join his new team. Not breaking the bank. The Patriots are near the bottom of the league in terms of cash spending. They're near the top of the league in terms of available salary cap space. And this was a need for your New England Patriots. And we'll start there as to why this signing matters. The Patriots did not have enough behind Rhamondre Stevenson. Kevin Harris had been given all kinds of opportunity to take that number 2 job and run with it. Slide into the Damian Harris role, where 9.5 per game in terms of rushing attempts last year, 1.5 catches, so about 11 touches per game. A sizable workload when Harris was healthy enough to take it on. Could Kevin Harris maybe do the same thing? I thought he impressed at times, honestly, last year with what he had done in the regular season, but based on what we've seen this summer, he's not that guy. I saw him get tackled one-on-one by Jalen Mills in a goal line period earlier this summer, then against the Texans, and I know the Patriots offensive line performed poorly in that game, especially in the run game. But there's a 4th and 1 situation. I thought he had a little bit of room to run. To me, Harris wasn't somebody who was going to hit the hole hard enough, fast enough, quick enough to be able to be that short yardage, tough yardage back that the Patriots want alongside Rhamondre Stevenson. That's what Ezekiel Elliott is. And when you look at the rest of the Patriots depth chart at the position, they're dealing with all kinds of injury. When we were last at Patriots practice, Monday this week before they headed to Green Bay, it was Rhamondre Stevenson, Kevin Harris, J.J. Taylor, and C.J. Marable, straight out of the USFL. That's not enough in terms of capable pieces to be trusted with the football in their hands in critical situations when the games really matter. You know, Pierre Strong apparently dealing with some kind of injury that he suffered in the preseason opener because we did not see him at the 2 practices that followed that game. Ty Montgomery still banged up as well. So that's a thin position that's getting thinner. And it may thin out even more as the summer wears on. We understand how difficult a position that is, what kind of injury risk that position carries. So to get someone who's capable, who's done it before, who, yes, has a lot of miles on the tires at this point in time in his career, but has also been incredibly durable. I mean, the guy's had at least 230 rushing attempts in each of his 7 seasons leading up to 2023. There's value there. So the depth that Ezekiel Elliott brings to this running back room behind Rhamondre Stevenson as a complement to Rhamondre Stevenson is critical. And that's reason number 1 why I like this signing for the Patriots. Reason number 2, he does a lot of the things that the Patriots need at that position that even Rhamondre Stevenson, as great a year as he had last year, doesn't do apparently quite as well. Now, again, any running back's production is going to be a function of what he has in front of him on the offensive line. So if the Patriots offensive line isn't there, then I'm not anticipating Ezekiel Elliott or Rhamondre Stevenson or anyone for that matter to be all that effective in any category. But last year, Ezekiel Elliott in short yardage, this is from my story on NBCSportsBoston.com, one of the best backs in the league when it comes to the tough yards. When I spoke to someone in the building immediately after it became clear that this was going to happen, the first word that came back to me was tough. That is his reputation in the league. Between the tackles, grinded out kind of player, someone who's going to come into the locker room and I think have the respect of his peers very quickly because of the kind of player he is and because of the established production that he's put on the board already in his career as a Dallas Cowboy. But when you listen to some of these numbers, his percentage of carries, last year, according to True Media, that went for 0 or negative yardage was 5th lowest or 5th best among qualifiers in the league, according to the Washington Post, which has its Washington Post expanded football stats. It's one of Tommy Curran's favorite websites. He was 5th in the league among running backs, converting in 3rd and short situations. He was 4th, converting runs inside the 10, 4th, converting runs inside the 3, and that's into touchdowns, not just first downs, but inside the 10 into touchdowns, inside the 3 into touchdowns, low red zone, goal line. This is your guy. And Rhamondre Stevenson, again, when it comes to the short yardage stuff, not necessarily near the top of the league, even though he is at the top of the league. It's an interesting sort of dichotomy here when it comes to Stevenson's production last year, because he was 1st in the league among qualifiers in terms of yards after contact per attempt. But in terms of 3rd down conversions last year, Stevenson was 28th. He was 25th in terms of his percentage of carries that went for 0 or negative yardage. So again, that's partly a function of what the Patriots had on the offensive line last year, coached by Matt Patricia, coached by Billy Yates, in a new system with a new language. It was a mess last year. We understand. But these are areas where Elliott should be an excellent complement to what the Patriots already have in their lead back, and that's what he will be, their lead back, Rhamondre Stevenson. Additionally, again, think about toughness. Think about hard yards. I've heard him referred to here locally in the media as a 3rd down back. That's not Ezekiel Elliott at this stage of his career. Does he still have some value in the pass game? Yes. And I would say particularly as a blocker. And I'm smiling as I say this if you're watching on YouTube, because it feels like everyone wants to note the fact that he's pretty effective in pass protection. He's actually better than that in pass protection. Each of the last 2 years among qualifying backs, he's been top 5 in terms of pressure rate allowed, according to Pro Football Focus. So when he has had snaps where there's been the opportunity for him to allow pressure, it's not a spike, it's not a tear screen to a receiver on the outside. When he's had to settle in, anchor down, and make a block, he's effective. So if they need to use him in that way, if they need to occasionally throw him the football, something he's done plenty in the past, then yes, he could do that. If Rhamondre Stevenson goes down, misses time, sure. You could essentially hand Stevenson's role to Elliott. Now, is he going to be as effective? Are you going to want to give him as many touches as you would give to Rhamondre Stevenson? Probably not. But in a pinch, he's the kind of multi-purpose back that would be a suitable replacement for Stevenson, as opposed to somebody like Kevin Harris or somebody even like Damian Harris, who gave the Patriots a little something in the pass game, but not much. Elliott also doesn't fumble. So toughness, takes care of the football, helps get it in the end zone. You can see why Bill Belichick would like this guy. In 503 attempts over the last 2 seasons, he's fumbled just once. If one of your mantras is dependability is the most important ability, and you're constantly on the field, you're constantly available to take those 230 plus attempts every single year. If your other mantra is ball security is job security, then yes, you're Bill Belichick and you're going to like Ezekiel Elliott. So 11, maybe 12 touches per game, take care of the football, put it into the end zone, keep the chains moving on 3rd and short, have the ability to, if needed, fill in as a receiver in the passing game. Maybe, just maybe, let's throw this out there. Maybe see some pony sets. You know what those are. You get 2 backs that are capable in the pass game. You align them right next to the quarterback in the shotgun, and you've got a supersized version of James White and Dion Lewis from a few years ago alongside Tom Brady. Now, that might especially be in play now that Mike Gesicki is banged up. NFL media reporting that he could be back week 1. But right now, you've got basically one true NFL tight end on your roster in Hunter Henry. If anything were to happen to him, sure. You want to go 4 receivers, 1 back? You could do that. 10 personnel, all well and good. Even though the Patriots don't have a number 1 receiver, they do have some depth there. I'd say they have 5 NFL players at that position. Any game changers? No, but you could run out more receiver bodies if needed. But maybe you go with 2 backs, 3 receivers, and you get Elliott and you get Stevenson both on the field at the same time. That would be intriguing as well. Okay, but understanding for the most part, these guys aren't going to be on the field together. How do they impact one another? Not just for the long haul, as we described. Yes, Rhamondre Stevenson might be at his best now in December and January because Ezekiel Elliott is here to take some of the workload off his plate. But what happens to these guys from a fantasy perspective. I know we've got a lot of fantasy listeners out there in our Next Pats audience. That's why we're bringing Matthew Berry to detail for us. What does this do to Rhamondre Stevenson? What does this do for Ezekiel Elliott to drop him into this Patriots offense? Okay, before we get to our conversation with Matthew Berry, I have to remind you, get ready for draft season with the Roto World Fantasy Football Draft Guide, featuring content from Matthew Berry, including player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. Without further ado, here's our conversation with Matthew Berry. There he is, the wonderful, the talented Mr. Roto, Matthew Berry. Thank you so much for being with us here on Next Pats.
Phil, my pleasure.
So we had a little bit of news, Matthew. I'm sure you heard by now, and I know you've heard because I've seen some of your takes, but we want to dive a little bit deeper into this Ezekiel Elliott signing. The first thing I want to ask you is, because Rhamondre Stevenson is already on plenty of fantasy teams, and because he was viewed as such a key component to a lot of fantasy rosters, if you have him in Dynasty or otherwise, what does the Elliott signing do for Rhamondre Stevenson's fantasy value?
I mean, so listen, it hurts it a little bit, obviously, because you've got an effective goal line back in Ezekiel Elliott. Last year, here's the thing. In terms of touchdown rate on carries inside the 5-yard line last season, among the 25 most used goal line running backs, right? Ezekiel Elliott was the 4th best in the NFL in terms of touchdown rate on carries inside the 5-yard line. All that it's just a stat that tells you what you sort of know if you watch football, which is like when they gave it to Zeke in close, he's pretty good. Meanwhile, in that same stat, touchdown rate on carries inside an opponent's 5-yard line, Rhamondre Stevenson 23rd in the NFL among those qualified running backs. So it's an area where Stevenson struggled somewhat. I mean, I think the easy analysis here is that Ezekiel Elliott takes the Damian Harris role from last year for the Patriots. So it's not great for Rhamondre Stevenson's fantasy value because there is somebody to, in essence, take away some of those short touchdowns. Having said that, I actually think this is the best possible scenario for Rhamondre Stevenson's fantasy value. Look, they were always going to bring in somebody else. We know they brought in Leonard Fournette for a test as well. Dalvin Cook was out there. There was always the thought that the Patriots were going to bring in a veteran presence to complement Rhamondre Stevenson. And given the fact that at this point in his career, Ezekiel Elliott isn't really used that much as a pass catcher, what this means is that Rhamondre Stevenson is going to have the passing game entirely to himself, or at least the majority of it. So I think for Rhamondre Stevenson's fantasy value, it's better that it was Ezekiel Elliott and not Leonard Fournette, for example, who is a very capable pass catcher and could have eaten into more of that role. So, look, I still have Rhamondre Stevenson very high. He's my running back 13. I had him at 10. He drops at 13. What this means is that Rhamondre Stevenson still is a borderline RB1, high-end RB2 in fantasy. I think the floor is still there, but it takes out the ability of him to become like a top 3 or 4 fantasy running back, where if Ezekiel Elliott wasn't in town and it was just him and the Pierre Strongs of the world, I think Stevenson had a shot at a top 5 fantasy season.
I love that take by you because having spoken to people in the building, Matthew, the thing that landed Elliott here, the reason why he was so attracted to Bill Belichick was the first word that came back to me last night was toughness. So those hard yards, those short yardage situations, those goal line situations, which I know will make Rhamondre Stevenson fantasy owners cringe, but those are the reasons why Elliott was here. It's not in the passing game. So Stevenson's still going to get plenty of third down work. I've heard Elliott referred to as almost a third down back here in New England locally. And that's like in the media world, I think he's still viewed in that way. But by the Patriots, he's more of a runner than a third down type of player now at this point. So still plenty of PPR value for Stevenson. How about Zeke? Like, is he a viable fantasy running back in your opinion at this point?
Listen, I think so. I think lower end. I mean, look, I think he's going to give you nothing in the passing game. And so he's going to become a touchdown dependent, RB 3-4 in that mix. I currently have him at running back 40. Like I said, I have Stevenson at running back 13. So a pretty wide gap for me there. I will say that he's a really important insurance back, that if anything were to happen to Stevenson in terms of his injury, Elliott would become really, really interesting here. I almost think I'm going to say poor man's, even though he's Ezekiel Elliott. But, I think back to some of the LeGarrette Blount years for the Patriots. Not that one year where LeGarrette Blount had like just a massive touchdown year. But I do think like that's what you're going to get from Ezekiel Elliott fantasy-wise. It's just kind of north-south, early down work, short yardage. You're hoping for a touchdown. I think in weeks in which Zeke does not score a touchdown, I think he's going to be, single-digit fantasy points. But I think it's more often likely than not that he'll score a touchdown. I mean, last year the Patriots offense was, to me, a mess, right? I mean, it was just really lost, obviously. And even last year, in a lost season for the Patriots offensively, they were still 16th, middle of the pack in terms of goal-to-go rushing attempts. So I think with a more functional offense, that's what I expect to happen this year. They'll be in scoring position more often. Zeke's going to get more run inside the 10-yard line. So I think double-digit touchdowns is very much a real possibility for Ezekiel Elliott. Again, he's a touchdown-dependent RB 3-4, so we're in that range.
And if you want Rhamondre Stevenson in fantasy, would behoove you probably to figure out a way to end up with Ezekiel Elliott on your roster as well.
Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/NBCSB and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/NBCSB.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support, Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
Last thing I want to ask you quickly, Matthew, just for people who haven't yet done their drafts, is there a strategy that you prefer? I know you can't win your league in the first 3 rounds, for instance, but you might be able to lose it. Are there positions that you feel like are must-haves by the time you're done with your first 3 rounds of your fantasy draft?
Yeah, no, listen, I'm a big, let the draft come to you, best player available. I generally, when I do my drafts, I generally wind up with either 2 wide receivers and a running back, 1 wide receiver, 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. But at the right, Kelsey's absolutely a first-round pick, and depending on your league, especially if it's a 2-quarterback league, I don't mind going quarterback. You're not going to lose your league if you wind up with Hurts or Mahomes or Allen in the first 3 rounds as well. So I don't mind any of that. But generally speaking, most people come out of their first 3 rounds with either 2 wide receivers and a running back or 2 running backs and a wide receiver. That said, I don't think you win your league by going in and saying, I must get this player. Let the draft come to you. Every draft is different. Certain players fall. You never know. You're like, I didn't expect that guy to be there. I'm in a draft right now. I'm picking for, it's a 12-team league. I'm picking from the 9th spot. And when the second round came around, I grabbed Stephon Diggs from the 9th pick, which lower than I thought he would go. I grabbed Stephon Diggs in the first round, and then in the second round, coming back around, I didn't expect to go wide receiver, but Davante Adams was still there, and I'm like, well, I'm not passing on Davante Adams at that, who I have a low first round grade on in the middle of the second. So again, let the draft come to you.
Got to be a little Belichickian when you're drafting. You've got to be willing to play the game. Matthew Berry, thank you so much for playing the game with us here on Next Pets. Really appreciate all the insight. And have a fantastic, fantastic fantasy football season.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm going to call it right now. I think Hunter Henry has a great year.
I'm with you there. He's got to be a top 10 tight end, yeah?
He's not being drafted as such. People actually are drafting Mike Gesicki ahead of Hunter Henry. Now the injury may change that, but up until like a day ago, Gesicki was going ahead of Hunter Henry in drafts, and I think that's a mistake. Again, Hunter Henry very quietly led the team in red zone targets last year. I believe in end zone targets last year. There's a connection there. I understand he's having a strong camp. I really like Hunter Henry this season.
Love it. Bonus Hunter Henry nugget, Matthew. Thanks again. All right, great stuff there from Matthew. And you got a little extra on Hunter Henry at the end as well. That position, that tight end position, if you haven't had Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or maybe in some years Darren Waller. It's been sort of a wasteland position, the kind of position where you're streaming constantly. If you're anything like me, you're just looking for matchups. If you don't love the idea of doing that, and you would rather have one guy that you feel like could give you something solid on a weekly basis, I agree with Matthew. Hunter Henry, not a bad option for all the reasons he mentioned. And then I would add this one, just for being out there at practice every day. Hunter Henry is arguably Mac Jones's most trusted target. Now, I think that's middle of the field. I think that's in the red zone as well. I think it could be on third down. If he is available to Mac Jones, if he's on the field, is he always going to have the best matchup? No, because he's not the quickest guy in the world. He's not Rob Gronkowski in terms of his length or his strength, where he's always open, even if he's not open. I'm not necessarily sure you would treat him that way. But Mac Jones knows that Hunter Henry is going to be where he expects him to be, snap in and snap out. I think that trust will go a long way. Trust is something that's still developing between Mac Jones and Juju Smith-Schuster. Jacoby Myers is out of the picture. We know what Devontae Parker is. And so when you need 6 yards on third down and you got to have it, is Devontae Parker on a jump ball along the sideline going to be the guy that you go to? I don't think so. I think Kendrick Bourne, while in my opinion, one of their most talented receivers, I'm not even sure how often he'll be on the field, quite frankly, right now. And he's been trending up. On our latest Stock Watch column, he's going in the right direction. He's been getting better and better, but I'm not even sure he's going to be in their top 3 in third and long when the season comes around. Where does Pop Douglas fit in? Where do they want Tyquan Thornton to fit in and his speed and everything that he can do to an opposing defense in order to open things up, maybe for somebody like Juju Smith-Schuster? Does that maybe nudge Kendrick Bourne out of the picture on third down? You know who's going to be out there in Hunter Henry, as long as he's healthy. You know he's going to be out there. Even if Mike Gesicki comes back, Mike Gesicki's not a true tight end. We understand that. I think you're going to see very few personnel sets where it's Mike Gesicki and 3 receivers and 1 back. 11 personnel with Gesicki on the field doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. In some ways, you want him in 12 personnel with only 2 other receivers on the field and Hunter Henry, because then it's pretty clear to the defense, okay, we have to be ready for both. We have to be ready for the run because Hunter Henry can block and Gesicki's essentially a receiver anyway. If you had Gesicki out there in 11, well, then any idea of unpredictability sort of goes out the window. If he's your only tight end, then you know the ball's going in the air. And maybe that's okay on third and long. But again, I just think it limits the situations in which he'll be used. Hunter Henry, meanwhile, will be on the field. You know he has Mac Jones's trust. That, I think, equals fantasy value. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much to Matthew Berry for spending some time with us. We're actually going to have more Zeke content for you very, very soon. James White, the legend, Patriots legend, 3-time Super Bowl champion James White is going to be with us here on Next Pats, sharing his thoughts on what Ezekiel Elliott's addition means for this Patriots offense. You're going to want to keep your eye out for that. We'll talk to you then.